Phew. Baruch Hashem, I remembered to record. Okay, so we're going to start again. Welcome, everybody. This is part one of the series called Putting the Ideas of the book, Your Awesome Self, to Work for You. We're specifically focusing on relationships, and within relationships, we're going to tackle some difficult relationships, because relationships are really at the heart of so much of our joy and grief. Most of you have received already the worksheets and the outline that we'll be following tonight. If you didn't, you can get it by WhatsApp, 718-576-0338. You can also get it by email, by emailing to info@energizedliving.org. Again, the number is 718-576-0338, or email info@energizedliving.org. I won't be able to send it now, but you can get it in Mirz Hashem tomorrow morning. Okay, now when people ask about how to implement the ideas of the book, everybody comes from their place, from where they're stuck, from where their challenges are. And everybody's path is going to be different, but there are some things that are the same for everybody. So I hope to share some of those ideas. The way it's going to work is we're going to have today, and then this week, Wednesday night, is part 2. And then next week, Wednesday night, in Mirz Hashem, part 3 will be mainly questions and answers or discussion. We've had some really good questions, and I'm looking forward to an open discussion, not just questions and answers. And many of you have asked this also. Yes, you're definitely welcome to share. If you're in a community and you're doing this as a book group, you're definitely welcome to share this material, the workshop with your group. So before we start, you'll follow along on the pages. I'm on page 2, which is really step 1 in the workshop. We're gonna do, what we want to do is develop a little bit of awareness of where we're at and a vision of where we want to be. And of course, the reason for this is because change is so difficult, and the work of growth is so uncomfortable. So having a clear vision of where you're going is really what makes the work so worthwhile. It inspires you to invest your energy even when things are uncomfortable and difficult. So the way we develop awareness is really asking yourself questions. So I put together a couple of questions. I want to tell you that when we did these workshops in person, even just listening to the questions was helpful, but people who sat and wrote down answers and really gave it some thought and went home and thought about it a little bit more and came back the next week and shared a little bit more, those people really experienced even more change, more transformation that they really want. It was able to help them more, because that's really where the change happens. Nobody changes from reading a book. Nobody changes from listening to an inspiring talk or a workshop. Change happens in your own mind and in your own heart. So the more you think about it, the more you process, the more you make a personal connection with whatever we're talking about, that's where your magic, your changes, that's where you'll experience the goodness that you're after. So take a minute to think about this. In which relationship, somebody's not muted. If you'd like to speak up, or just remute yourself. In which relationship would you like to see change? I want to recommend to choose one relationship to focus on in this series. Like that, you'll be able to be focused, and definitely everything else every other part of your life will be enriched, upgraded, enhanced. But focus on one so that you could literally measure your success and your progress. So what are the main undesired aspects of the current situation or the current relationship? Take a minute to think about it. And what seems to be causing the problem? If we would be doing this in a live group, we would have some answers. If anybody's willing to speak up, you know what? I'm not going to go there because that would take another half hour. And although I do believe, okay, let me put this out there. There's somebody who is starting a small group, also happening on Zoom, for people who want to do this interactively in a small group. So WhatsApp to 718-576-0338. She's a life coach, a wonderful life coach, and a very wise woman. And she's starting a small group for people who want to go through the questions in person. And you can join, I'll connect you with her. So I'm going to just quickly read through the questions and give you a half a minute to think about it. Okay, what seems to be causing the problem? What's your contribution to the problem? And I know that sounds kind of obnoxious, maybe on my part, because maybe you think that it's the other person's problem, but we always contribute in some way to whatever problem we're experiencing. In your efforts to make things better, what have you tried that didn't work out very well? What do you still keep trying that doesn't work out well? This is a very important question to ask yourself, because so many times we keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. So it's very important to notice what we tried that didn't really work out well. And number 6, which parts of the relationship are working well? Which parts do you like? I think it's a very also important question to ask, because this is really what makes the relationship precious, meaningful, and worthwhile. What seems to be causing the desired aspects of the situation? What's causing that? And okay, now come the magic questions. In coaching, there's a magic question, and you may all be familiar with it. And the magic question says, if you wake up in the morning and your problem is all solved, what is the first thing you're going to notice? So bringing that question to our work, when the relationship improves, what might it look like? What are some of the details that would be different in a practical way in your relationship, in your life? And also, I have a few other questions specifically about that. When the relationship improves, what would change? What would change for you in your personal mood and in the way you feel about yourself? What difference would it make to your personal schedule? Think about how much time, effort, and energy is blown when we're upset, when we're frustrated, when we're so sad that we're drained. So what would change in your personal schedule? What would you suddenly have time for or energy for? What would you start or stop doing that you're unable to start and stop doing right now? Okay, so those are the questions.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure. Hi.
Okay, so hi. I might have missed it because I walked away to get a pen. When you're saying relationship, who are we, relationship with who?
It could be with anybody. It could be with anybody, but specifically we're talking about somebody, a difficult, a challenged relationship. We're focusing on a
Could it be a child? Could it be, or does it have to be an adult? Like, what are we?
Honestly, I had in mind an adult. It could be an adult child. Some of the things will definitely have a lot in common with even young children. So it could be anybody. You'll see. Some of the principles are for anybody. Thanks. That was a good question. Okay.
Thank you.
On the next page, we have a big circle. And on the edge of the circle is a bunch of little circles where you can just remute yourself. Okay. A bunch of little circles where you can put in names of anybody in your life, and you're at the center. And the point of this, when you put this down on paper, you see right away that, each of us, we are involved and invested in so many different relationships. And there's one thing that's in common with every single one of them. And that one thing is, I don't see you. I don't see so many people. We have our screens off. Thanks for everyone who has your screen on. It makes us all feel more connected. Hi. Thank you. So the one thing that's the same in all relationships is our own self. And we are at the center. We are part, at least 50% of every single relationship. So that's we are an important part worth investing in. I want to share a quick story. I'll share it quickly. Story I just read in a recent Family First. It was a story called The No Good Goodmans. It was ridiculous, a ridiculous story about a woman who felt very inferior to new neighbors who were moving in, who happened to be particularly, this woman, I don't remember her name, I'll call her Leah, she hated the new neighbors without even knowing them. She called them, their last name was Goodman, and she called them the No Good Goodmans, even though she didn't know them at all. But she hated this woman who was always dressed to perfection from early in the morning till later in the evening. She literally hated her for nothing, just for being rich Leah's husband was a marriage therapist. And one day she decided that she's going to follow Mr. and Mrs. Goodman wherever they go in the morning. And she followed them, and she followed them straight to her husband's office. And she literally laughed out loud. She said, oh, while I was, being so, feeling so intimidated and inferior, and I hated them. I hated her for her amazingness. Look, she needs marital therapy. Poor her, Nebuch, And she started, and she suddenly saw herself as having something major to contribute to Mrs. Goodman. And that day, she posted on the block chat, it's about time because all the neighbors were having the same attitude. She posted, it's about time we bake an apple pie. I'm baking an apple pie for the Goodmans. It's about time we welcome them. She welcomes them. She goes over to their house. She's so gracious. She invites her kids to play. And she's so, and in her mind, she's also thinking, I better be a good role model because I have to show what a healthy home looks like. I have to show Nebuch. She already wrote a whole story that this couple is in terrible distress. Anyways, a couple of days later, she's talking to her husband, and of course she's not going to ask him about a client because that's not appropriate. But she said something about the Goodmans and I don't remember exactly what. And he said, yeah, they're such special people, and they really recognize the value of marriage. And they actually visited my office and gave me a lot of money to sponsor the therapy for couples in need. And then the next morning, she hates her all over again. So what happened here? I hate the story. I don't like the story. But the reason why I'm sharing it is because, first of all, it's just one little thought here. So many times we read stories in Jewish magazines and it presents a reality from a perspective as if it's normal, and it's really not normal. This story is one of those examples, but it's so extreme that I'm sure it's just there to show how our perspective about ourselves, how we see ourselves specifically in context to other people, colors our experience and our interactions with that person. So on this page 4, we want to develop meaning. I'm sorry, I'm backing up a second. When she felt inferior, when Leah felt inferior, she hated the Goodmans. And when she felt better about herself, she felt like she had something to contribute. All of a sudden, she was able to be kind and nice. And by the way, all that was when the new neighbor did not do a thing. There was no problematic behavior on the new neighbor's part. All of this is so much more magnified in a relationship when there actually is problematic behavior. So we're not calling the existence of another person who is intimidating problematic. Problematic behavior, let's be very clear. We're talking about people who put you down, invalidate you, minimize you, ignore you, get defensive when you share your needs, are dismissive, disrespectful, just plain nasty. If somebody wants to, you know what, I'm gonna go back to muting everybody. I'm going back to muting everybody, and we'll open up for questions at the end. Okay, so let's take a moment to develop. So in that, I'm sorry, Leah, her attitude, her beliefs about herself, we saw such an extreme shift in her relationship and her experience of the Goodmans that she called them no good. Let's take a moment to reflect and develop some awareness about how our definition of self, and especially our sense of self in context of other people, how does that impact and make a difference to our relationships? Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Okay, we're going to start just by developing an awareness of how our beliefs about ourselves impact the relationship, and then we'll take it further. So a relationship is the space between two people, and each person contributes to that space. So in a problematic relationship, two things are happening. Number one, the other person's contribution is a mess. You don't like what the other person is doing. But number two, you don't like you don't like yourself in the context, in that relationship. You don't like yourself. Maybe you're uncomfortable with yourself. Maybe you feel icky. Maybe you feel small. Maybe you feel disrespected. Maybe what comes out naturally is just less of really who you really are. You don't feel like you are your empowered, beautiful self shining forth, but rather because you feel in that space, we tend to feel very small. We don't like ourselves in the space of a problematic relationship. Now, we can't change the other person, obviously, but we could change how much we like ourselves, and that completely changes the cycle. Let's take a quick look at the cycle. Number one, somebody's raising their hand, but I don't know how to do this, so I'm going to ask you to keep your questions for the end. If your question is that you need worksheets, email to info@energizedliving.org and you'll get them tomorrow. Try to follow along as best as you can for now without it. Okay, so the cycle is like this. We begin with our beliefs about ourselves, my sense of empowerment, and that meets up with another person's. I meet up with that, carrying that in my backpack. I meet up with another person's behavior. Okay, and then that together, the other person's behavior plus my beliefs about myself influences my choices, what I think, what I say, and I do, and that influences and reinforces my beliefs about myself. So let's take a look I think I wrote it better. So our beliefs about ourselves exist before our experiences. They are the springboards from which we engage in our lives. That's the first, that's the beginning. Number two, our beliefs about ourselves then determine how we experience other people's behaviors, right? Because like in the story, the lady was just standing outside her house, outside her door. Just the fact that she was so rich and so beautifully dressed felt very intimidating to Leah without Mrs. Goodman having done anything. So in our lives, very often our rules and especially our beliefs about ourselves have a big influence on how we perceive another person's behavior. And number three, our experience, our understanding of what happened and our emotional state then determines our response. And then our response reinforces our beliefs. So the beginning point is the root of everything is our beliefs about ourselves. So that's really where we want to start doing some work, because when we change that, we change everything. If I believe I'm not good enough, the problematic behavior then reinforces that belief that I'm not good enough. And we all tend to feel like we're not good enough. As much as we work on feeling good about ourselves, we have a Yetzer Hara that is self-destructive inherently. It's self-destructive by nature, and it gets new life and new energy every single day. So people who have a tendency for self-destructive and self-loathing or self-hating, which many of us do, it's a new morning every single time the sun shines. So if I feel that I'm not good enough and I then encounter behavior that's problematic, that makes me feel even more victimized, helpless, and more stuck. By contrast, if my self-respect is untouchable and unchangeable, I will still bump into that same problematic behavior, because some relationships and some situations, they're just problematic. But if my respect for myself and my sense of empowerment is unchangeable, untouchable, and unconditional, I won't feel stuck. I will still be empowered to choose light, joy, and meaningful possibilities. And let's see how we can do that. Let's turn the page. And now we're going to bring our self-respect and Hashem's empowerment of you to the problematic behavior. Now, in the book, we talk a lot about this at length. It's in part 2 of the book. I want to encourage you to look that up, because I'm not going to go through it all but this is just what we're trying to do, is how to bring all that in the book a little bit more home. So Hashem gives us a part of himself within us. And within every moment, Hashem is not just giving us life, but he is empowering us with his energy, with his vitality, with his unstoppable light. So the more value we attribute to Hashem, the more value we attribute to his empowerment, his presence within us. And the more we value his presence within us, the more we value and feel and experience his empowerment of us. So the more he makes a difference in our lives, the more his empowerment of us is going to make a difference in our lives. So let's see how this plays itself out specifically in a difficult, problematic relationship. Like when you encounter rejection, disrespect, dismissal, unfair, belittlement, ignoring, obnoxious, rude, etc. Toxic behavior. Okay, so what do you believe about yourself? We're going to go back to that cycle that we just spoke about in the previous page. We're going to show how our beliefs about ourselves, we're going to go a little bit, get a little bit more reflective about how our beliefs about ourselves meet up with problematic behavior and how that impacts us and what we do with it. Okay, so on a scale from 0 to 10, think about your problematic relationship for a minute. And actually don't. Think about yourself for a minute. On a scale from 0 to 10, how much do you respect yourself? Put up fingers. Let me see if we can put up some fingers. How much do you respect yourself? Scale from 0 to 10. I can't. I'm seeing a lot of empty screens. Okay, I'll just deal. Okay, to what extent is your self-respect untouchable by anything or anyone? On a scale from 0 to 10, to what extent is your self-respect untouchable by anything or anyone? And by what I mean by that is, when the wind blows, someone insults you, do you lose your self-respect or do you hold on to it? To what extent are you able to hold on to it, no matter what you meet up with? And number 3, to what extent do you experience Hashem's unstoppable empowerment of you on a daily basis? How much does that make a difference in your life? How much do you feel it? How much do you experience it? Okay, so that's all, those are 3 big ideas about our beliefs about ourselves. Now, hold on to that. And let's see what happens when we, with that level of self-respect, with our personal, individual level of how much we experience Hashem's empowerment of us, when we meet up with problematic behavior, what does the behavior, ask yourself this question, what does that behavior say about you? What does the behavior say about you? It might mean you don't matter. Matter is a bad word. Or it's a buzzword. It might mean nobody cares, I don't respect you, you don't deserve respect, you don't deserve connection, you don't belong here, I don't need you, I don't care about you, etc. Okay? It might say you're not important, your opinions don't count, your thoughts, your feelings, your identity, your life, doesn't matter. Okay, is that true? And obviously it's probably not. So if it's not, what is the truth that you want to believe about yourself that would replace this nasty comment or this nasty belief that was just in front of you, on your head, the mud that was slung at you? What's the truth beneath? Like, if you want to clean off the mud, what are you going to replace it with? Now I want to ask you a different question. You know, there's 2 totally separate things about when something nasty comes our way. Now, saying, you know, it's really not true. The process that we talk about in the book at length, you know, it's really not true. I can hold on to I can choose dignity, I can choose my worthiness, and I could be me, even if that person is she or he. I'm still me. No matter how many times somebody treats me like a tree, I'll still be a person. I'm still me. So we can do that work. At the same time, there's always an element, especially in a relationship that we are invested in, whether it's a close family member, especially in a marriage, a child, a sibling, a parent, in-laws, a good friend or neighbor. There's also an element of deep pain, and that's a totally different part of the story, and that's something that has to be dealt with separately, in addition to the work of, because that's there regardless of how much you like yourself and respect yourself and what you believe about yourself. There's always that element of pain of, hey, I wanted to be treated with decency, with kindness, with sensitivity, with love. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be understood. I wanted to be wanted. And the loss of that is painful, and it's not something that we could rationalize away. So that's why I put into the same little circle there. Number 3, do you avoid, agitate, and escape, or do you validate the pain? Because part of being empowered is also dealing with our pain. And the language that I put here is the spotlight in your mind outward or inward? I don't know about you, but my default setting when I experience something unpleasant or hurtful or even very painful is, oh, that person is such a whatever. That was disgusting. That was so mean. As opposed to that, when I do that, what's happening is the spotlight in my mind is focused outward. It's on the other person's behavior. And what I try to do instead is turn that spotlight inward to how I feel. Oh my, that hurts. Ouch. That was not fun. That really, like my daughter, who is Baruch Hashem married now, when she was 4 years old, she was complaining about her brother, and she said, he smashed all my feelings. You know, something smashed all our feelings. So we can say that when the spotlight of our mind is turned inward, and then we could process our emotions as opposed to avoiding, agitating, and escaping. And when we do that, okay, so that's the empowered way. We recognize we look at what the behavior says about us. We identify what the truth is. We deal with the pain, and then we recognize our choices. What are my choices? What do I think, say, and do? How do you help yourself feel better at this point? Am I going to bash the other person, or am I going to hold my little broken heart and comfort myself and do something that will actually be helpful to me and healing and productive? How do you respond to the other person? And how will this experience, I think this is always a very important question that I try to ask myself, how will this, because Hashem does nothing for nothing. No tears are ever shed in vain. So every painful experience has to have something productive, meaningful. I always say, when the tears of pain fall, let something beautiful be born. So what's that thing going to be? How will this experience help you or other people? And you got to come up with at least one positive thing. Now, imagine, I just gave an example of what this looks like from an empowered perspective, okay? What would happen if I believe, let me do it the other extreme, my belief about myself on a scale from 0 to 10, I'm a 0. How much do I respect myself? 0. To what extent is my self-respect untouchable by anything or anyone? Below 0. To what extent do I experience Hashem's unstoppable empowerment of me? 0. Okay. If I have 0 self-respect, and again, I'm showing or if I have a 2, if I'm an average of a 2 or even a 3, when I encounter problematic behavior, it's not just that I say, oh, the other person thinks I am worthless, or the other person is acting as if I don't deserve respect. I take that on as a self-definition. I take that on because I don't have a sense of self. So that person's behavior becomes my identity, and that hurts. But I don't realize that it has to do with my beliefs about myself. So what do? I hate the other person. I hate the other person. Like in the story with Leah and Mrs. Goodman, she hated Mrs. Goodman without realizing that it was only her own rule and her own inferiority complex that was making her feel so small and so worthless in the face of somebody who was actually a really wonderful, might have been a very wonderful person. It's clearly somebody who liked giving tzedakah and who cared about other people, but she hated her because she didn't have that awareness to recognize that it was only her own beliefs that were making her so miserable. Her own beliefs were causing her to feel so uncomfortable and horrible in that relationship. So even if the other person's behavior is problematic, our own beliefs will just make that feel much, much, much worse. And then our choices, instead of choosing these kinds of things like helping ourselves feel better, we will bash the other person. We will start talking to anybody who's willing to listen. We'll beat them up in our minds. We'll write nasty messages, emails, texts, WhatsApps. We will say things we don't mean. We will say it meanly. We'll ignore. We'll avoid, agitate, or escape, right? Either we'll avoid the other person, we'll agitate about them or to them, or we'll escape, we'll numb ourselves from feeling the pain, and nothing good will come out of it. And that's one way of dealing with problematic relationships. I could tell you I've been there and done that. It's not so much fun. And beginning from a place of Hashem's empowerment, or not beginning, because every day is a whole new beginning, beginning every day from a place of Hashem's renewed empowerment of us doesn't necessarily change the problematic behavior, but it changes our experience of it. It completely changes our response to it, and we can have a beautiful day despite someone's problematic behavior. Okay, let's turn the page. And now, and we are going to have time for questions. I am sorry. Write them down if you're afraid you're going to forget them. On the next page, on page 6, we're going to develop awareness of how much we actively experience Hashem's empowerment of you. Because many people say, yeah, I say my Da'ani empowered. Yay. So why do I still feel nasty? It must be the other person because I feel empowered. So what I'm going to ask you to do is look at what real empowerment looks like. And again, and I want to say this, I should have said it before. If you're getting zeros, that's actually terrific. You know why it's terrific? Because it means maybe that you're being honest, and don't use this as another reason to not respect yourself or not like yourself, chas v'shalom, or not feel empowered. Use this as a map for where you want to work. All of these pages are in part 2 of the book, step by step. You could text me for exact pages if you want, but that's again 718-576-0338. But don't use it as a description. Don't use it as a label of who you are. Look at it as a map of where you are in your journey towards more goodness. Because if you're a 0 tomorrow, literally tomorrow, you could be a 1, and the next day you'll be a 2. And it's tough work, but it's relatively fail-proof, and it really works, Baruch Hashem. Okay, so let's develop some awareness of how much you actively experience Hashem's empowerment of you. And what can you do to upgrade your experience of his empowerment? Since Hashem's empowerment of us makes such a huge difference, that's why this is so important. It's so important because if Hashem's empowerment of us would just be a PS on the bottom of our story, we wouldn't be spending our time developing awareness about it. But because Hashem's empowerment of us makes such a big difference to our experience, it changes how we perceive other people. It changes how we respond to other people. It changes everything about our unpleasant experiences. So it's very good to have awareness of how we're doing in this area and where we can gain more strength. Okay. So number 1 is I have a reservoir, and I doesn't mean me, but we all do. We each have a reservoir of inner wealth that we can tap into at all times and use in many different ways. And why is that? Because Hashem's empowerment of us, Hashem is infinite, Hashem is indescribable. Hashem is not limited to one particular description. So Hashem's presence within me, because he's unstoppable, and it's a force of energy, a force of light, it gives me courage, strength, dignity, worthiness, you name it. It can give you whatever you want it to give you in any situation. It's indescribable. It's indescribable. So you describe it, you give it definition, you use it in whatever. It's like the mun could taste like any food. Hashem's light could give you any kind of strength or courage, whatever you need in any kind of situation. So how much do you feel that inner reservoir of wealth, of Hashem's wealth, pulsating in your heart? Number two, I feel empowered to make choices. Hashem's presence within us and Hashem's empowerment of us means that we have the power to choose. We have the power to make choices. So I feel number two is when we feel Hashem's empowerment of us, I feel empowered to make choices, and I recognize the quality of my life depends more on my choices and less on what happens. That's also, label it from 0 to 10. I feel empowered to make choices, and I recognize that the quality of my life depends more on my choices and less on other people's behavior, or less on what else happens. And the third indicator, the third measuring stick for how much of Hashem's empowerment we experience is I make choices that keep me connected to Hashem, my power, which perpetuates my sense of empowerment, right? Because if Hashem is our empowerment, if Hashem is the source of our empowerment, we want to make choices that are aligned and that keep us connected to his power, because that's how we feed that's the life force. That's the pipeline for the energy of our empowerment. So the bottom line is that the more we experience Hashem's empowerment of us, the more energy we invest in our choices, and the less energy we lose on other people's choices. Experiencing Hashem's empowerment of us equals experiencing a better quality of life. Okay, so that's the bottom line. The more energy we invest in our choices, the less energy, the more we experience Hashem's empowerment of us, the more energy we invest in our choices, the less energy we lose on other people's choices. I feel like we do have, I'm going to open this up to questions, even though we're not finished. I don't know. I'm going to try to do this. Sorry. Because I feel that this is getting too intense and too boring. Okay. So if you have a question, unmute yourself and speak up.
Should we, if the situation's negative, because we've fallen into a role, are we obligated to stay under that? Is part of empowering ourselves do we need to force ourselves to stay in the negative place? Is that a stronger position if we stay in a place, we're big enough to stay in a place of abuse, or should we get out?
You should make yourself unabusable. That's what I'm trying to say here. Do you hear that? Is that English?
Yeah, in other words, you can go in there and nothing would happen to you because you've got the armor on.
It's internal armor. It's a belief about ourselves. I'm not abusable. Now, it doesn't, when somebody could theoretically be unabusable and experience abuse. So I think this is a personal question, and I'm always worried that somebody should use the information that I'm sharing here to perpetuate real abuse or dysfunction. I'm not talking about that. And I think that if somebody has this question on a personal level, they should ask consult with a mashpia, with a friend, with somebody who knows your situation and somebody who really believes in the institution of marriage and in the institution of Avos Yisrael. But it is a personal question, but in general, that's the main topic of how we could be unabusable. Thank you for that question. That's a great question. Anybody else? Hi. Okay. You can also text your questions. Emir Hashem, we will devote part 3 is going to be all about questions. There's some really good ones that already came in, and the number to text the questions to or to email is 718-576-0338 or info@energizeliving.org. Okay, so number 6 is develop awareness of how much you value the impact of your choices. Okay, let me backtrack for a second. In the last page, my main point of the last page, I think, was that when we experience Hashem's empowerment of us, the bottom line is, because we have that inner reservoir, the reservoir of inner wealth, and we have that ability, and I'm forgetting what I said, so let me, okay, I'm sorry. The inner wealth that we could tap into at any times, the empowerment to make choices, we can then make choices, right? Now, the question is, how much do we really, so we want to know another real way of saying, am I in a place of empowerment or am I in place of disempowerment, is to see how much do I value my choices? How much do I value the impact of my choices? The more we see ourselves as impacted by our choices, the less we'll see ourselves as impacted by other people's choices. At different times, we engage in different relationships with more focus on others' choices versus our own. I think we each have moments where we feel empowered, and we have moments where we feel very disempowered and weak and helpless and stuck. So let's take a look at a little bit of a spectrum of possibilities. Okay, think about, and this, I want you to think about your problematic relationship. And before we looked at how we think about ourselves, let's take a look at how we see others. How we see ourselves in context of others. If you would see yourself as empowered by Hashem, what would change for you? How would the relationship be different? That's the bottom line question I want you to ask. But look at these 4 images. First one is a victim. What's a victim? A victim is someone who feels that all the empowerment is with others. And I'm not saying a victim in a moment of crime. I'm saying a person who comes to situations like a victim, comes to a party and already, I'm talking about Leah in that story. She was a victim. Even before Mrs. Goodman did anything, she hated her. She felt helpless. She felt that Mrs. Goodman had all the power to do everything. She had no power in this relationship. She had no power almost in her life because of Mrs. Goodman. So that's what I mean when I say a victim. A victim is somebody who comes into a situation, walks into a room, and everybody around them has the power. A victim is somebody who is in a marriage and feels that their husband or their wife is so powerful and doesn't feel their own sense of power, their own sense, their own impact have on other people and on themselves. A victim, that was number 1. Number 2 is the unchangeable fact determine the quality of my life. A victim looks at, if it's raining, it means I'm going to have a gloomy day. The sun is not shining, I will have a gloomy day. The unchangeable facts. You are mean, I will have a bad day. You are nice, I'm going to have a happy day. That's a victim. Whatever is unchangeable, and unchangeable is usually other people's behaviors, but it also is things that are unchangeable, like just plain reality, how much money we have, who we were born to, what happened in the past, and other people's behavior are all unchangeable facts in our lives. A victim is somebody who looks at the unchangeable and says, that is going to determine the quality of my life. I have no choices. When I meet problematic behavior, it's going to destroy me, and it does destroy me. It destroyed me yesterday, it's destroying me today, and it's probably going to destroy me tomorrow. Now while I'm saying this, you might, huh?
Can I ask a question? I don't know if I can hear you. Let's say there's someone that is the status is a status where you obviously you need to respect him, her. Let's say that's your mother, mother-in-law, husband, whatever the scenario is, and that person is saying things that is insulting or whatever his or her words are. There's untruth in it, and so.
Okay.
You want to, you're empowered and you know that you're feeling, confident that you really sort of know MS and the other person is a bit off. But then again, you want to retain the respect that you should have for the relationship. So how do you go about, to me it's a bit of a scope, how do you go about realizing that what's being said might not be in a state of wisdom, and yet you want to retain a respectful feeling. Do you understand my question?
100%. I understand your question. I'm going to ask you if I understand it correctly. What you're
Okay.
saying is, how do you reject what the person is saying without rejecting the person?
Beautiful. Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I think that all that we're talking about is leading up to that 100%, because if I hate myself, I will hate the person who makes me feel so hateful. I will hate the person who makes me feel so bad. But if I can feel good about myself, I don't have to hate the person.
Right. So we're not talking about hate, though. See, we're talking about respect. You feel good about yourself. I'm sorry?
Look, all of this is based on Tanya. So let me give you one thing in Tanya. In Tanya, the Baal Tanya talks about the difference between right? The soul, the soul, and the essence of the soul. Okay.
Wait, that wasn't clear, I don't think.
Okay. So
your bandwidth is low.
Talks about the difference. My volume is low?
No, the bandwidth is low.
Okay, sorry. Okay. So I don't know. I hope I'm not getting too distracted. Basically, the whole approach of this is that we are not the sum total of anything external about us. We're not. We are our neshama, and we value ourselves because of our neshama. We are empowered because Hashem empowers us. We are worthy because Hashem says so. So all of that is separating our neshama from our behavior. And the more we could do that for ourselves, the more we could do that for other people.
Okay. Thank you so much.
And you could respect, just like I could respect myself, and I should respect myself and value myself and know that my respectability is untouchable, no matter what I do wrong, no matter what mistakes I make. So too, the other person's respectability is untouchable, and they deserve respect no matter, regardless of their mistakes. Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. So let's go back to what we were talking about. The victim is somebody who is on the lowest end of feeling empowered. All the empowerment is outside of the victim. The unchangeable facts are beyond, that's the beginning, that's the dead end of the victim's life. There's no choices. When I'm a victim, when I meet problematic behavior, it destroys me. Now let's take a little bit more empowerment. Now let's say I do have a little bit of empowerment. I'm an observer. Okay, as an observer, my empowerment is there, but it's mostly irrelevant because I'm not going to change anything. Whatever the reality is what it is, right? It's going to be whatever happens, happens. My choices are just not relevant. So when somebody has this attitude, when I meet problematic behavior, I wait until it passes. And Baruch Hashem, it usually does. Okay? I just wait until it passes. I hold on tight. I wait until the wind stops blowing. I wait until the sun shines again. I wait until it passes, and it usually does. That's an observer. Then we have somebody who avoids and escapes. This person, we feel that when, and I'm not saying this person, because I think each of us is a victim, an observer, an escapee, an avoider, and empowered by Hashem. We each go there at different times. And the goal is not to constantly only be in that place of perfect empowerment, because we're not perfect. The goal is to keep coming back to a place of empowerment. So when we avoid and escape, we are feeling like our empowerment is limited. It's limited, but I don't know how to help myself really, but at least I could protect myself from being abused. I could protect myself from experiencing the other person's behavior. I could protect myself from experiencing reality as it is. My choices, I don't have that many choices, but I have some choices. My choices are limited to the other person's direction. Depends. If they go right, I'll go left. If they go here, I'll go there. When I'm, as an observer, as an escapee, when I meet problematic behaviors, what do? I avoid it, or I distract myself. I just don't do problems, okay? As a person who's empowered by Hashem, my empowerment is unstoppable. The unchangeable facts are the space where Hashem is asking me to choose. Here's where I have to make choices today. I invest 100% of my energy in my choices. Even 1% of energy, focus, attention on other people's choices comes at the expense of fulfilling my life's purpose, which is my choices. So when I'm empowered by Hashem, when I meet problematic behavior, I deal with the pain and I choose a way forward. So each of us could find ourselves in each of these different places at different times. And the goal is to get into a place of empowerment. Now I want to say this. People are people, okay? And every different people are different. What is it actually that makes behavior difficult for us to handle? What makes it so difficult? When a person has the key to something that we value or we need, we naturally this is what happens. What's happening is that we magnify the impact of their behavior, and in that space, our choices seem impossible or irrelevant. In other words, when someone has something that we really need or we really want, and we can't get it because they're withholding it, all of a sudden we magnify their behavior, and in that space, my choices don't matter. In that space, I become a victim, I become an observer, or I become someone who needs to avoid, agitate, or escape. If you think about your problematic relationships for a minute, within that space, how do you see the other person? Okay, which keys are they holding and withholding? I would love if you can take a moment to look at the list and circle everything that applies. Love, belonging, connection, understanding, trust, validation, respect, security, acceptance, protection, access to desired connection. I want to be heard, feeling valued by others, feeling wanted and needed by others. These are all basic human emotions, basic human desires that we want in our relationships. I'm not talking about the physical, the task-oriented stuff. I'm talking about the emotional component. Okay.
Can I ask something?
I feel like yeah, go for it.
Could it be that sometimes you're being the abuse? I'm saying, like, because of someone else's behavior, you're abusing them. It's that their behaviors is triggering something in you
Yes,
as
100%.
more than you're being abused, but that you're abusing.
100%. We're going to get that in a minute. We're going to get to that in a minute. Thank you. That's a very important question.
Can I also ask a question?
Sure.
Let's just say it is access to desired connection is the issue. So
Okay.
I struggle with wrapping my head around how if I admittedly feel that the other person is holding the keys to access to desired connection, which kind of makes sense because it kind of takes two to tango. How do you like dance around that? Because that's a connection involves two people. Like security is really like, you know, or my worthiness, my validation, it might just be work on, I could do by myself, but access to desired connection is very much something that, like, how do you resolve that if you cannot change another person's behavior?
How do you resolve any of this? I don't think any of this is resolvable. We're going to get to that next week. But what we're not talking now about how to resolve it. Right now, we're trying to, like what you said, wrap our head around what's actually going on. What's actually going on? When we have all these stuff, someone else is holding the keys or withholding the keys to this kind of goodness that we want. Okay? What's happening is that we feel that they have the keys to something that we want. Right? The pain of our loss, the pain of that withholding, naturally distracts us from the possibility of our choices. That's what's happening here. This is the nature of being human, right? Somebody else is holding something that I want. So all of a sudden, I feel stuck. I feel like I have no choices. Because I know that I need that thing. I need security. I need to be able to trust that person. I want validation from that person. I want connection with that person. I want to feel like I belong. All these things, right? So when I don't have that, the pain of that loss is going to distract me from the possibility of my choices and from the impact of my choices. And then the big question is, where do we go from there? What's going to happen next? And what usually happens is, if I feel like I don't have choices, what's going to happen is I'm going to act as a disempowered person. So let's turn the page. And now we're going to come to the question that the person asked before. Each of us has two completely different ways of being. There's how I am when I'm empowered, the person I want to be. And then there's the person I show up as. Okay? You are inherently awesome. Each of us is inherently awesome. When you're experiencing Hashem's empowerment of you, what does it look like? What are some of the qualities that you value or that you demonstrate to other people? So let's say you value being kind. Let's say you value being generous. You value being sensitive. You value being tolerant. You value whatever you value. Think about what you value, right? If you value being kind, sensitive, and caring and patient, when you show up with those qualities, it makes you feel empowered. It makes you feel good about yourself. It perpetuates your sense of worthiness. It perpetuates your sense of goodness. Now, in a problematic relationship, what's going on? Are we our best self, or we're completely less than our best self? We might even be abusive, like somebody else just said. We might even be our nastiest self. We might even be engaging in behaviors that we really, really, really don't want to be doing. So in your problematic relationship, your behavior is very different from the person you want to be, okay? Which of your better qualities are missing? Which of your better qualities are missing? Which less desired qualities come up for you? So for many of us, it might be, I value being patient, but when I'm in my problematic relationship, I'm going to be completely impatient. I'm really a good listener, but I have no ability to listen to this person. I'm a bad listener. I'm going to interrupt 3 times a minute. I'm really very kind, but if I dare be honest, if you just look, take a video, that was not kind. So when we show up with these behaviors, with these qualities, what impact does it have on us? We feel disempowered. We feel more weak. We feel more stuck. So when we're empowered and we feel like I could make choices and we show up to our relationship the way we want to and from a place of choice, that perpetuates, like the cycle that we said in the beginning, that perpetuates our sense of empowerment. By contrast, when we come and we act disempowered and we act less than our best self, we feel even more disempowered. So there's a very big gap between who we want to be and who we actually are and who we show up as in our problematic relationships. On your most challenging day, how big is that gap? On a scale from 0 to 10. Is it a 5? Is it a 4? Is it a 10? What creates the gap? If I would look into the gap, what I would see is, first of all, a lot of pain. Well, of course I can't be kind. I'm so pained. I would see a bunch of beliefs and rules. I would see interesting habits. We would see fear and anxiety. So all those things are really what get in the way of us showing up as the way we want to be. And in Mirza Hashem, next week, we're going to look at those 4 elements, those 4 parts of what gets in our way of showing up the way we want to. But for now, I just want to point out that all of these things, the one thing they all have in common is that they all contribute to making us feel disempowered. And by dealing with them, learning how to deal with them, that will contribute to enabling us to feel empowered. So now so that's what we're going to do next week. We're going to take a look at what gets in our way of feeling empowered and coming to our relationships from a place of more of Hashem's empowerment, experiencing it, activating it, acting on it, and engaging in our relationships, even in our problematic relationships from that place. Before we conclude, I would love, if anybody has any questions, we'll take a couple of more minutes for questions. Go for it.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, is this only about relationships with people, or is it also about circumstances? Because a lot of what you're describing, I feel in reaction to circumstances, situations that seem to be out of control.
100%. It's also a relationship with things. It's our relationship with money. It's our relationship with ourselves.
Health.
Yeah.
Fears of health, or
yes,
circumstances of crazy things in the world, anti-Semitism out of control, whatever it is.
100%.
Does any of this help with that?
Well, what are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
I would love to know how to apply it, how to get, how to apply that.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Next week, we're going to go into the specifics of what gets in our way of applying that. Because really, applying that, it's like when someone wears a gown and high heels, they automatically stand taller and walk in a more dignified way. And nobody could teach you how to walk that way, even if they tried for a million years. The minute you just put on the pretty dress and put on your best shaitel and your prettiest shoes, you walk differently, right? Is that true?
If you don't have foot problems.
Oh.
No, I'm serious.
Right. Okay. So, but the natural thing would be to walk a different way unless you have foot problems. So there's an element that needs to be tapped into and experienced and cannot be explained. The only way to experience it is to, it's very interesting because in the Tanya it talks about so much about meditating about Hashem's greatness, right? Over and over and over again. And really Yiddishkeit is built in a way that enables us and gives room for us to do that. Every morning when we say Mada'ani, it could either be words that we say, or it could literally be a 30-second meditation. Every time we say a bracha, it could be a 30-second meditation. Davening could be a 30-minute or a 15-minute meditation. So if it's a meditation, we are thinking about Hashem's greatness. From there, it's a short little bridge to thinking about the fact that Hashem's greatness is invested within us. And that right this minute, Hashem is literally directing a flow of his self into us. His self is shining forth into us, an unstoppable flood of light, of love, of goodness, of courage, of strength, of Hashemness, of godliness. There's not enough words to describe it. So we could sit here and talk about it for 100 years and never really experience it. According to the Tanya, the only way to really experience it, or at least an appreciation of it, is through spending time, focusing our mind and our attention, thinking about it. And the best time to do it, I think, is Maida'ani, Elikai Neshama, to say Adonai Olam and read the English translation every single day. It's life altering. So that's one part of it. Okay, that's the part of it that we naturally walk differently when we feel it, when we know it, when we experience it. And then we have to deal with the foot problems. Because then there's stuff that gets in our way of dealing with it. And that's what we'll do with Meretz Hashem next week. If you want to take this home, I would suggest, if you really want to upgrade your sense of Hashem's empowerment of you, say Adonai Olam every single day, and say Maida'ani every single day. Think about what the words mean, and spend 15 seconds, 30 seconds thinking about Hashem's and visualizing Hashem's unstoppable flow of light into you. And what does that mean to you? Where are you going to take it today? It's like every morning, the fact that you woke up, Hashem is giving you his light, his self. And he's saying, just carry me with you. Let me shine forth through you in whatever you do today, wherever you go, whatever you say, whoever you meet, whatever situation you encounter. Bring me along. Let me make a difference. That's Dir B'Tachtainim. So that's it, my dear friends and sisters for tonight.
Thank you.
I look forward to joining you again on Wednesday night, but Wednesday night will be at 9:30, not at 9 o'clock, 9:30. It's the same Zoom link. If you didn't get the papers, email to info@energizedliving.org or WhatsApp 718-576-0338. And I very much would appreciate if you send me your questions, so that for part 3 will be, part 3 is basically going to be some really good, juicy questions. I want this time to be personally meaningful for everybody who's on the call. And one more thing, I said it before, but I want to say it again. If you want to join a small group of women who are going through the questions and actually sharing with each other, it will be probably no more than 6 women in a group. Message me, 718-576-0338, and I will put you in touch with a group of wonderful women who you can go through the worksheets with and really experience more of the change and the awareness on a personal level. Thank you again, and a good Tanakh. And I'm staying on if anybody would like to speak up.
Thank you.